event, but you guys, most of you that are here know what AI Camp is. It's a global AI developer community. It has well over 350,000 members. I think last count is closer to 400K. And my name is Devinder. I'm the I'm volunteer for AI Camp out of San Francisco. One of the chapter leads now. And yeah, we hold a bunch of events about getting folks to understand about different aspects of AI. We have folks in product, software, deep, engineers with deep backgrounds in AI, and quite a few times we have folks come in that have are building startups, or they're from the big companies like NVIDIA, and they talk about some of their products or some of the things that they're working on. Today, as you've asked, the focus is on some of the newer tools that have come around in terms of AI. Just by a quick show of hands, how many people actually don't develop at all in software engineering, in using any AI tools right now? Great. So I personally think this might be of most value to those folks. But even if you do, there's so many tools coming out right now. And I've developed a philosophy around that. I'm hoping to organize this in a way that makes sense for everyone. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story. And as we go along, I think I'll spend about 20, 25 minutes on my story. And then I'll open the floor to the kind of problems that people have in software engineering with AI, or like what they're looking to do, maybe some hopes and aspirations. I really like the community aspect of AI Camp. So after I'm done with my spiel, I'd really like to open the floor to at least 5 or 10 people. It well depends on who's still here and who's interested, and to get to learn about what you want to do, and if you maybe know something that we don't know, the rest of us don't know, or like something that you found really cool, or what your big questions are. So that's the overall spiel. Let me get started with my slides. So who am I? My name is Devinder. I think I've already mentioned that. I used to work until pretty recently at Johnson & Johnson. I've been a software engineer for a few years now. I've also managed teams, and I typically focus in R&D. And so I get to play with the fun toys. And over the course of the last couple of years, one of the big projects that I had when Copilot first came out was GitHub Copilot. Everyone familiar with GitHub Copilot? Yes, yes, yes. Lots of thumbs ups. Okay, if you're not, don't worry. I have links for you towards the end of the slide. So GitHub Copilot, if there's a couple of you that don't know, is this extension to VS Code that allows you to do the very first bit of like AI coding. And what it allowed you to do was do some smart autofills that allowed you to get some context around your code. And in the early days, you didn't even have context for your whole code base, but it was already very useful. What was happening around 2022 is a lot of folks were and especially at work and a lot of different places, they were starting to get used to using ChatGPT already, and companies were really concerned that you can't do that. We have proprietary data. And so there's something to be said about folks doing that really carefully and then trying to manage, none of the details go into the code. But Copilot was one of those first tools that was exciting for a few different reasons. Am I sharing the right screen? AI coding tools. Okay. Yeah, perfect. And so my goal has always been to try to see what it is that we can use in production, and how do we get our organizations, a lot of you are going to be software engineers, to actually take this new ChatGPT thing and the tools that come out of LLMs in general, and actually be able to use them for work. You see so many examples, and for very good reason. They're very simplified examples, where they'll demonstrate one really cool thing you can do, or like you can build a SaaS page, but all you see is like the front end of a page. And when you start to utilize these tools, there's a bunch of questions that come up, right? The reason Copilot was really interesting is they made two claims. For the very first time, I don't think ChatGPT was making those claims at all at the time, is that you own the code that you generate, and that we're going to give you enterprise grade security, right? It's just these two things at the Microsoft conference, I want to say last year, made it so that I was able to pitch that whole thing to Johnson and Johnson. It took us about a year, but we got through legal and all the channels to make sure that we utilize this tool. And roughly speaking, I think my estimate after uh, really analyzing how this tool works is just the ability to add tests, just the ability to analyze some of your code and add comments, sped up our engineers by potentially as much as 20%, right? Let's see, I have a question from, and use them, ChatGPT for work, meaning accelerate development with LLM tools or make new apps to work. That it's a good question here. What I mean is that folks would, say, "Oh, I'm trying to analyze something or research something online," and sometimes people would be working on a new problem where, in the past you might go to a Quora or a different resource like that. Now folks had the option to like try something in ChatGPT, and more we were starting to see that has become tempting for engineers to just plug in some code into ChatGPT. And at that time, there were no privacy guarantees that that any of the businesses at least recognized, and so that was really problematic. The reason Copilot became really interesting is because there were these guarantees that you own your code, we don't take any of your code off site, and that you're going to have all these guarantees. So this is very beginning, is like very new at that time. Even speaking to a lot of attorneys is like, what is the liability, right? Like, if I write some code and it gets me in trouble, but I generated it using an LLM, who's liable? There's a bunch of questions being asked that were really interesting at the time, and I felt that this was the very beginnings of like us actually being able to utilize the tool at work. And this is just a spiel for how long it took. Okay, and about half a year into utilizing these tools, I saw a bunch of new things starting to come out. I tested them personally because my job was to create a bunch of use cases for how this like new technologies can actually be utilized at work. And one of the places where I ended up testing a bunch of these tools were just hackathons that we were either running through AI Camp or some other means. And there was, excuse me, there's a lot of stuff going on, especially when we're working with AI Camp. You have to agree to sponsors, you have to help the new coders, you have to, and then you have to try to build something yourself. And one of the tools that really shone on day one when it first came out was this thing called Replit Agent, right? It instantly gave you an environment. The demos were amazing. It was really, really beautiful because you would just tell this bot essentially what to do. By the way, Replit Agent is the only one that I still don't have, so I won't be able to give you a demo later on if you guys want to see some demos. But it was nice. You tell this agent, I want a web page, it will give you a web page. And about an hour working into it, it actually started to slow down, and then if let's say you create like a really nice GUI for your front page, but then you want to add one machine learning algorithm to test something, or you want to add one SaaS component or one database, it started to kind of turn into loops. Has anyone had that experience in the past? Let's see if I can make it bigger. Command plus. I kind of want to, so some folks have had that experience. Okay, that's great. It's not just me. So this might actually be worth your time, right? And that was really problematic. There were a few things that were going on. First of all, at my very first hackathon, I used it for about an hour and then it crapped out. It said, you don't have any more tokens left. And I was like, okay, how am I supposed to actually utilize something like this if I don't have enough tokens to get through a hackathon? And then the other thing that it kept doing was it kept going into loops. So as soon as your complexity was added. So I needed obviously more credits. That was the first thing. That presentation is small in layout, change the screen to spotlight. And zoom into slide by clicking on it. Oh, is this not big enough, folks? It's good enough. Okay, it's better now. Very good. Okay, and so out of that need came Bolt.new. I was actually at this hackathon for at ETHCon, I think it's called. It's for Ethereum and ETH Global, and I tried Bolt for the very first time, and you'll get to see some of those results shortly. Um, and it had beautiful, gorgeous UI. It had working integrations. It had some of the same problems, but as my program became a little bit more complex, and I'll share with you the program that I put on there, it was literally using like 100K context points, or like whatever they call their currency, per update. So about an hour into the program, I was maybe 2 hours into the program, I had spent $50 essentially, right? So that was problematic. But that itself wouldn't stop me, because if it's getting me a whole program over the course of a weekend, I think that's worth it, right? If you spend $100 and you get a whole program out of it, that's still totally worth the money. The ROI on that is great. Maybe not for a hackathon, but certainly for work. But there were still problems with it. It definitely had this issues with destructive editing, where like if you ask the AI to, and this will become a little bit more real for most of the folks, but if you ask the AI to make a change to a file where like one function is wrong, it'll rewrite the whole file. And then some of the things that it rewrites is not what you asked it to do at all. And these kind of questions and issues keep popping up with like Bolt.new, and then it has this huge infrastructure where like it connects with Netafly, you can connect it with Supabase. Those integrations actually work really well, but they actually get in the way because they add complexity to the overall program. They get in the way of you getting stuff done. So because I think this might actually be worth showing right now. So this was my old Bolt account. It's still should have some let's see, what was a thing that I really enjoyed? So yeah, this was an app that I tried to build. Let's hopefully it doesn't show off any of my keys or anything. But the idea was simple. It was close to Christmas time. I wanted to create an application that would take my Audibles and make a really nice, just based off my Audible account, kind of like what you'd call an agent today, go through the account and generate a nice page out of it. And the front of the page, this took 5 seconds, right? And I think if you're like me, a backend engineer, it's pretty good that this took 5 seconds. I do some front end work as well, but it's never that clean. It's never that fast. But as soon as I started to actually go into the logic of it, we ended up in loops. We ended up with the same kind of issues, and it just wasn't working. Like I was really frustrated because we're getting like 100 tools a day coming out, and none of them actually work for me. And I realized it might just be me, right? It might just be stuff that I'm doing wrong. And so I kept trying. I kept trying different tools, and where I landed was partially because I'm a software engineer, is that tools like Cursor and Windsurf, which are essentially IDEs very similar to Copilot, but they have a few more evolved features. Those things do a much better job of maintaining context, not running out of credits as quickly. Cursor still does, but I don't know if anyone's noticed, but Windsurf gives you pretty much unlimited number of credits, so you can keep iterating over a program over the course of days, especially if you have one of the paid accounts. And what's really nice, these tools are evolving to have new functionality where, like Windsurf, for example, the last time I checked, wasn't doing destructive edits. If you asked it to change a function, change the function, it didn't rewrite the whole file. It had broader context overall, and it was getting to a point where I could actually use it for work, right? So there's a few things that Bolt, and I think it's fair to say that both Bolt, Replit, and again, Lovable is another one that I used, did a fantastic job of overall, giving me what they are meant to give me, which is prototypes. But they weren't really, they weren't the tools to do like software engineering work, and I was trying to fit them into that hole, and that was a big part of the problem. I was also starting to realize that the way I've been thinking about like trying to get an AI, if I just throw in a prompt and get it like a perfect response every time, it's the wrong way to think about the problem. The way to think about it is that I never had the ability to do unit tests automatically before that I could just check, right? Never had the ability to automatically kind of figure out like all my diffs and like the context of my programs. And then I never had the ability to um, iterate quickly in technologies that I never knew before, because these software can essentially help you learn a new language much, much quicker. And when you think about it from that lens, and when you add the fact that they have privacy, they have some security, now you have tools that you can actually use in a professional environment. Even the, not to like, kick on Replit and all those things, because people do use them in production, but when you come to the agent component, like even those, like to prototype something quickly and then pull it into like more complex software, you as a professional are going to have to make some of those decisions. And those decisions are primarily going to guide like how you go about like whatever your philosophy on coding is. For me, it's I like to see certain things. In fact, I'm building applications to make software even more consistent when you use them with LLMs. And I think we're in a really good time where these software companies like the ones behind Cursor and Codium for Windsurf are competing so fast that new features are coming up like every single day. So what I think you need is, basically you need to be able to predict the costs. Right now, Windsurf, hopefully it's sustainable. All of the LLM use cost is getting driven down. Quite a bit of the work is getting done actually locally on the LLMs themselves. You can preserve existing code. For me, like that's really important. If you keep losing entire files of code, you don't have any control. If you don't have like good version control, you don't have any control. And so you'll find whatever your version of this is to actually be able to, get through a day of work. And I think that's the key. So we had a question, especially because I've been rambling for a while. I welcome the interruption. Let me try to see who asked it. No? All gone? Okay. So the overall theory is this: you don't need perfect code generation. You still have to make changes. You have to look at your own code as it's generating thousands of lines of code. We really should be looking at most of it to try to understand what's going on. You have to do the augmentation yourself, and you have to kind of take care of the enhanced capabilities and focus whatever it is that you're an expert in. And if you're not an expert, use these tools to learn, but don't try to use them as like this end-all thing, and don't sort of worry about the 100 tools that are coming out. Focus on one or two that kind of get you to really a place that you want to be. For me, that means, something that's sustainable, something that's non-destructive, and something that's traceable with version control. If your tool's giving you those 4 things, I think you're in a pretty good place to be able to pitch to your workplace that, we can use this at work. So that's the spiel. And I kind of wanted to tell you guys that this whole presentation is not a presentation. I actually built it in Windsurf this morning. So I don't know how to generate presentations like this for a front-end GUI, but I was able to, just iterate over some things in Windsurf and give it an idea of like what my talk should be about. And it just generated this whole thing for me, right? And I thought that was pretty neat. Then I tried to see if Lovable would do the same exact thing. And it sure did. I actually think it made it look a little bit nicer. So, did the same exact thing. I gave it some feedback on like the way that I wanted the slides to be presented. I gave it some context around like what my story is and like what I want to articulate to everyone. And then it does the same exact thing, right? Like I just sat there and figured a bunch of this stuff out. We're going to get into talks about like how do you make these tools more consistent over time. but I will also have like some YouTube links for places that I found like a lot of value, and not just these websites, but also like these users who do a really good job trying to highlight like whatever like you can actually get out of these tools. And I think that might be useful. So I'll put that in the channel soon. That's actually the spiel. And hopefully I said it'll take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. That's what I took. And at this point, I want to open this to the floor. Like, how do you, having listened to this guy who's kind of babbling for like 20 minutes and talking about all these tools you can use. By the way, I also did the same exact thing in Bolt, but Bolt unfortunately ran out of money because I'm on the free version right now. Let's see, it'll load this. But the point was kind of like it'll run into issues like this. But the point was that creating something like even this presentation, which is a fairly trivial project, can be like something that you can do if you're just starting out. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing to be able to show. And with that, questions, please. So Cursor and Windsurf claim to be enterprise secure. I think Copilot gives you more guarantees, but I expect these startups will also give you, this is a question from Nico and Josie. Is Cursor and Windsurf, quote unquote, enterprise secure, or is it just Copilot, right? And the answer is, I think Copilot is the most secure right now. In fact, they made it free, but Copilot is the most secure because it has the most guarantees. But both Windsurf, Codium, and the folks behind Cursor are putting an effort to make it more than just private, but like to provide you some guarantees. I think Codium has a lot more experience in that field, so I trust them with my code a little bit more. And just for me, like the product has been working out a little bit better. Cursor, I think, also is there, but I would more focus on it for personal projects for now. I think there's definitely startups that have been using Cursor, and I think that's a completely reasonable thing to do. If you're in like one of those big tech companies, you might have to get manager approval. And what you can point to is the documentation where it demonstrates that your unpaid accounts that you're only in private mode, but you also have to do some research in how it's using your embeddings for larger context work that it does. Oh, which services and tools do I use for AI development? Yeah, I can list those. By the way, guys, if you want to like actually talk, I'm more than happy to not be the only voice being heard. These are like the top ones that I use for this talk. I've also used Klein. I've also used V0, I think we call it. Yep. Brian, did you want to ask a question? Let's see. I'm going to stop presenting. And then let's ask the question. Yeah, this slide deck is going to be available at the end of the presentation. I'm definitely going to put it in the Discord, but you guys have my LinkedIn as well. If you don't, I'll pop it in the chat. Just reach out to me. I'll make sure you get it. Okay. I also have a bunch of examples that I can show off. If there's interest, I'll give you guys something nice that like kind of shows how to do stuff like that. There's also a lot of interesting things going on. Like when it comes down to getting all of this stuff working and creating the context that you need. Really, you'll find a lot of these programs, the major thing that you need is a context where you need to be able to repeat your work and then have consistency. There's some tooling around that that I've worked on, and I'd be happy to share that as well. Let me just put a LinkedIn sort of link in here. Does everyone here have access to the Discord? I'm hoping you guys do, because that's how you would probably find me. So that's another place that all of this information is definitely going to be.
Hey, Devinder, thanks for doing this. This is Arun. I'm from Atlanta. Can you hear me though?
Yeah. Sorry. I hear you, Aaron. I had this person named Brian Pulliam who had also raised his hand beforehand. Brian, if you wanted a
Oh, I'm
chance
so
to,
sorry. Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
worries.
Go ahead.
Brian, I feel like you might not have been a contributor till just a few minutes ago. Maybe I missed you, but you're there now. And so let me know if you still want to chat and ask that
Yeah.
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So and I know the topic of this talk is maybe a little more advanced than this question, but if we're just starting out, like I feel like there's this dizzying array of tools and it's hard to know where to start. So
Yeah.
maybe for the people on the call that aren't willing to admit or like are afraid to say like I have no idea what tool to try out for what type of use case I want to start with. Like where do you recommend, is there like a either a guide you've made or like a URL that you point people at and say, hey, here's where you should start if you're starting from step 0 and you're like, I want to get into this, but I don't have experience and I don't want to waste a lot of time using
Yeah. Most of these conversations are typically like I'll have them
the
one-on-one,
wrong
and
tool. Like where
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Maybe I ought to kind of make a tool that make a quick post about like what tools are great. It kind of depends on what you want to do. So maybe let me show Lovable, which I think is very approachable. It's also got quite a lot of hype behind it, and it's also very easy to set up. Let's say you don't know anything about software engineering, right? And you just want to build something that looks like some kind of coding work, so you feel accomplished. Then I think that's one tool that's really great to get started with. What I'll do, I think, Brian, this is great feedback. I'll create a post that lists the use cases for each of these tools individually, kind of condenses what I've talked about in the slides. So depending on where you are in your journey, maybe you're more into back-end work, and maybe that requires a little bit more of a different approach, or maybe you just want to build like a cute website or your own personal website. In fact, I used Lovable to create my own website in about 20 minutes flat a couple of days ago, just because I needed a CES ticket, and that's what they wanted. Um, this is hopefully displaying. I think you get a few credits with them. Bolt.new also gives you a few credits. And you can literally, even if you don't have an idea, right, you could just say, use one of their existing ideas, like a habit tracker or e-commerce product page, and just hit create and see what it generates. And then tools like this will get you up and running in a couple of minutes, and then you can kind of poke at it. What I really enjoy about Lovable is you can actually look at individual components that are showing up on the screen and make changes to them. It does a fairly good job of actually making the changes that you might expect. All of this code that you're seeing is going to go away, and it's going to show like a demo. It also does a really good job of like connecting it to databases, so you can do like somewhat useful applications right off the bat. Does that answer your question?
it does. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So I have some homework, and I'll be sure to make that the slides a little bit more contextual, and that like they'll tell you exactly where I found a lot of value in these tools. Okay. We had, was it Arun next?
Yep, that's correct. Hey, yeah, I come from a more analytics background, ideal in biology, and when you said you were working at Johnson and Johnson, or still at Johnson and Johnson, it kind of clicked me that we probably belong to this similar backgrounds. But you are being a software engineer, I'm being a bioinformatician. I would want to understand what kind of, if it's not proprietary information, could you share some insights about what kind of implementation that has happened at Johnson and Johnson? And um yeah, I mean, yeah, that could be like a use case scenario for everyone.
Yeah, I can share with you high level stuff. I can't share like
For
specific
sure.
products.
Yeah.
But I can
That's what
share
I.
with you
Yep.
some high level stuff. So
Yeah.
as a whole,
Thanks.
the larger Johnson and Johnson organization is really, and I don't work for them anymore, so it's not like an advertisement for them or anything, but it's really putting their foot down on trying to get as much value, because there's all these research papers that have come out, and all these like studies that have come out that say, your engineering productivity will blow up. And just like a couple days ago, you heard from Salesforce that they're not gonna be expanding their team anytime soon until they kind of like swallow all the productivity gains that they're getting from all of this stuff. You'll see it across the board. I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit, right? I made a bunch of proposals, so I can't tell you about which ones were accepted, but some of the proposals for me were really straightforward. One was, if you have attrition in an organization, you still have the sum of the data that the person had. And using LLMs, it's fairly straightforward to collect all that data and create like a chatbot in and of itself, to be able to get most of like what that person worked on as a much more cohesive product, like where like you can kind of like talk to this person bot that has left and get a sense of like the things that they were working on, especially if they left originally. There's also not so sad cases where you might want to expand your unit test coverage. The FDA is always looking for better test coverage, better compliance, and you can make a case to leadership about how this is not expanding your work too much. You can even do analysis of your pull requests and stuff like that, where you get immediate value out of these things. The engineers intuitively learn very, very quickly when they want to put these tools to use. And you will certainly have, especially in larger organizations, use cases that you'll have to present piece by piece to your leadership to gain that comfort. I had to talk to our legal team, I had to talk to our IT group, I had to create a training to make sure that everyone did this training before they signed on to use LLMs. And then finally, when all of that was over, then the leadership was interested. Hey, what tactical approaches can you take to address a problem that we can take care of without affecting the rest of our work, right? That's hopefully a good answer. Like, does that cover it?
Yeah. You actually answered more than that I have asked. You also told me that the approach that you have taken to implement this, that is quite useful, because some of us in organizations, it's hard for us to reach to the top level with this kind of information that we have. We might be good at a lot of technical things, but putting that together and packaging it and discussing with the C-suite or even executives is the crux of all these troubles at times. And yeah, thanks for putting that
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
there. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have more questions? Let's see. Oh, I got a bunch of questions in chat. Okay, so there's a lot of support for Brian's question. It seems like I have lost some folks very early. I will not only, okay, I heard you guys loud and clear. I'll not only set you guys up with the tools that I think are best, I'll actually attach even more of the YouTube links that I thought got me started in like 5-10 minutes. And I'll make sure there's like a whole list of them that you can go through. But the reason I don't like doing that typically is because everyone has all these lists and it gets overwhelming. So clearly the reactions say create that list. So I'll make sure that list happens. And I'll put it in our Discord channel through AI Camp. I'll put it on my LinkedIn. Okay. All right. So after Brian's question, guys, I'm not able to read the whole thing all the way up. So please do raise your hands. I'm going to, okay, prioritize those. Abraham raised his hand. Abraham, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for hosting this type of event. This is my first time, but and I know you are talking more about tools, but talking about agents that you mentioned a little bit also. Do you have any recommendation on how to work with agents and probably an orchestrator like an agentic framework or something like that that you can build and use into production? The reason I ask is I work for a digital marketing agency, and there are a couple of orchestrators that I tried in the past, like Crew AI and many others. But when you put them into the front line, the content that you receive, like let's say you are creating content, it's not that useful yet.
Yeah.
So do you have any recommendation about it?
You've hit the nail on the head. I think agents are a really difficult thing to do. I think what you probably need, Crew AI is a perfectly reasonable platform to use, right? Yeah, there's AI Explain also, which Sonam, who's in our SF branch, she actually works for. She's another chapter lead there. But I think you've got the problem exactly right. The solution, it might not be as straightforward. I think evaluation is still difficult. It's something we're trying to figure out, like how to do it right. In fact, the folks at Replit, when they were building their agent, pretty recently, they put out this whole 30-minute talk about why they felt all these like things that they thought were like pretty straightforward became really difficult problems to solve. And so we're still pretty early in the stages of like evaluating well. There's obviously frameworks like, I think weights and biases and Ragas that can help us through some of that. But agentic frameworks, I think Leda might be a good one to look at. They need a lot more of that testing, a lot more than I think anyone initially expects to test. And once you, my strategy would be this. This is what's been working for me. I would really hone in on like one or two things that this agent ought to be able to do, and then test the heck out of that and try to evaluate around that problem, and then expand after like I've done that one very specific thing. And I mean this like almost treat it like an automation in the beginning and then expand. Like I know folks say agents aren't automation, but my experience is that a single automation is a great starting point to get your agent working in like one use case, and then you expand. Does that help?
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Basically, like creating an MVP for a specific automation and then move forward. Yeah, thank you
Exactly.
so much.
Yeah. All right. If by the way, feel free to raise your hand to ask questions, folks. I'm gonna. Oh, we got Nico. Hi, Nico.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, yeah, I'm a front-end developer, kind of the opposite of you. I'm amazed with what I've been able to do on the back end in very short periods of time. And my progress with coding with AI has been mainly just using ChatGPT to copy and paste either individual functions or full files and then talk to it. And then just before this Christmas, I started using Cursor after hearing someone did a hackathon with no coding experience and actually did pretty well.
Yeah.
And so Cursor has blown me away in that my big problem with ChatGPT was I kind of had to have a giant file so that all of the context was within the file rather than following correct principles of components and separating everything out. Cursor is great because obviously you could do it a little bit more correct and just include the context of each of the files. But I have noticed, like, as I'm building a bigger app, it is harder to non-destructively, keep adding to it or to be able to manage that scale.
Yeah.
I actually hadn't heard of Windsurf until today, but do you have any thoughts on the tools that I should be looking at for that type of like, okay, now we have a big app with lots of things and theoretically it's using just a tiny util from a separate file and all of that managing when you get to that level?
Yeah. Actually, that's kind of the core of like my interest in developing with AI tools. And so I have a couple of different things to say. There's, if you think about as your complexity is kind of going up, the amount of things that you should be asking your Cursor agent or whatever to do should be going down. So as your program is becoming larger and larger, maybe you're refactoring things, maybe you're adding functionality. In the very beginning, we have this sort of idea that just like you see on the board right now, like I want to build this app, build me the whole thing. But as you get more complex, it has to maintain all of that context. Now, Cursor has specific tooling to maintain context. It actually I think the implementation is a local LLM, which creates the embeddings for the entire context. And I think if you do like an I forget what is it, an codebase, it'll try to get as much of the context as possible, and that mitigates the problem somewhat. But it's not a won't-tell-all solution. Another thing that really helps is if you have really good Cursor or now Windsurf files. These files will kind of guide what they should have as content. And maybe I can show an example. If I have a gist ready, I'll do that. But what they do is essentially guide, what your structure of your overall program should look like. If you've been tinkering with Cursor file, feel free to interrupt me. I'm assuming you've used Cursor files in some way, shape, or form, right?
I've never heard of Cursor files. I literally just started using it this past Christmas, and I've been probably coding multiple hours a day with Cursor since.
Okay, great. Yeah. So as you expand on that, and Windsurf also, these things are moving so quickly, also implemented the same functionality. I think getting some structure behind that, there's a really good YouTuber named Yifan who does great videos on this topic. And in fact, he primarily focuses on TypeScript. I focus on C++, Qt, and Python. So I basically took his cursor files and made my versions of them. And so again, I'm happy to share that if there's any interest.
Yes,
I'll
please
again,
do.
yeah. And they'll help you maintain some of the context. Again, it is a problem. It's not a solved problem, but between the codebase being really targeted as you're just recognized, right? Like as your application is getting larger, it's going to start to lose context. You start to reduce the amount of things you're asking it to do. In the beginning, it makes sense to like brush with broad strokes, but as you get sharper and sharper into like the whole painting, like you have to use like finer and finer tools to be able to do it. And that's true even for AI.
Awesome, thanks. I'll look for those resources. Super helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna write a note to share my cursor files as well.
Yeah, greatly appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. Now, cursor files, I think regularly on my LinkedIn, I'll share resources like just my custom instructions for even like GPT and stuff like that. If any of that stuff is useful, just reach out, folks. I don't think any of that stuff is worth hiding. I think we should all share it as much as possible.
I would love your GPT setup as well if you're open to that. Thanks.
Sure, just send me a message.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah. What's next? By the way, just for the folks that missed it, see how easy that was, the Lovable thing. And the thing that I was talking about is that you can select individual components. Yeah, you can actually like select divs and say like make changes to stuff like this. And it's relatively easy to get started with. I don't think Lovable overpromises on what they are. They are essentially helping you set up the front end, and you can store it in your GitHub, and you can launch it with like, I think they recommend Netafly, and it's easy. Next question is from Marshall Terran. Let me see if Marshall is able to share. Marshall, I've just made you a contributor if you're still around. You can ask your question. And give it like 5 seconds. Actually, while I'm waiting for him, I'm gonna read the chat real quick. Brian, thanks so much for helping out. It looks like you're my unofficial moderator. I appreciate you. Any questions about? All right. I don't think any other questions while I look through the chat. Feel free to raise your hands, folks. Which tools do you use if you want to build AI agent? Stan, I think I answered that question. OpenQ. All right. Marshall, I think you've been made a contributor. If you want to sort of like last call, I'll move on to the next person otherwise. No? Okay. Sorry, who was next in line? This thing is really hard to navigate for some reason. I wish it was just give me a list. Pratibha, Discord link. Not sure what that meant, but I will. Oh, you want a link to the Discord itself? It's in your AI Camp email. If you don't have that, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll send it to you. Oh, someone did it. Perfect. Brian, I gotta pay you.
I see Marshall as a viewer, not a contributor. I'm not sure you made him a contributor.
I did on my end, but I
On
don't.
is still as a viewer.
I've been aggressively making.
Hey, I had a question.
Hey, he was able to chat just now. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Devinder. So my name's Steve. I am not a programmer per se, but have a pretty in-depth technical knowledge of AI, having worked for companies like Red Hat and used it in our actual business operations, right? How do you take the tools, like people thought they were going to lose their jobs. They were just frantic. And basically I led a team that integrated small AI solutions into like the actual workflow. My goodness, the efficiencies that we gained.
Yeah.
However, the aspect of workflows really began to be an issue, right? Because there are certain AIs that can do certain things. We sort of see it that way, and I'm kind of at a 50,000 foot level or whatever. But certain AIs can do certain things well. But we would like, let's say, I would like, right, something that allows me to integrate a workflow so that I can, essentially click a button and, this PDF, a PDF, which is, already in, whether it's RAG or something like that, is analyzed against another. And the difference between them is quickly pointed out versus point and click and drag and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So what you're asking for, are there tools to do that? Is that the question?
Yeah, especially because I do a lot of work with documents, and the variety of documents, although many are standardized, right? Statements.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of approaches you can take. If you have like an enterprise Google account, or like if you just have a Gemini account to start tinkering with it so you can make a use case for it at work. I think if I remember correctly, the latest version of Gemini has in fact like very robust like PDF readers in there that can just sort of act as an application of sorts. If you need a front end for it, I would say you probably build it using one of these tools with relative ease. But I would be really surprised if there's not some kind of a utility that's out there that does the analysis work. I don't know one off the top of my head. Anytime I typically need to do PDF analysis, I'll toss it into my GPT, just manually and try to give it some context around what it is that I'm trying to do. Most recently, I found there's this Google AI has this fantastic developer advocate. Her name is Paige, and she's demonstrated some really good applications of Gemini that do those kind of things almost out of the box. It's not like a complete application, but it's really, really good. And it's a few steps ahead of what like you'd expect out of a GPT. I'm sure there's custom GPTs as well. If you use custom GPT, there is for sure a custom GPT sort of PDF analysis tool, but then you have to make sure that you have your privacy settings right. Is that useful?
Sure. Yep. No, it's a reminder to Gemini's been kind of kicking butt lately with their little improvements over time. I go, oh, okay. But the fact of tying things together, tying workflows together, just is the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's so much stuff. I mean, guys, I don't envy anyone like having to go through a ton of things. It's just part of the point of this whole session is also that I went over 5 technologies in like 25 minutes, and then there's 10 more that are out there. Don't let that kind of get at you. Try to just focus on the ones that'll actually solve a problem for you. And sometimes you really have to actually put on blinders to be able to do that, because the next shiny thing is out like yesterday. So
they're so shiny, and I'm like, gimme. I got Perplexity. I mean, I got subscriptions: Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, and those are just kind of, they're not developer focused necessarily.
Yeah.
But it seems like, oh, maybe I need to look into the developer focused ones to help us build what we need to build.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. This is the kind of stuff I help folks out with all the time. I consult, I do the kind of thing. And frankly, we don't need for what you're asking, we could just have like a quick chat. It doesn't need to be anything like that. Cool. And there's a ton of folks at AI Camp who are very similar, very willing to help. That's the whole point of the community. All right. I wanted to talk about more app building. Yeah, feel free to reach out after, MA. I think you asked about 365. My experience with Copilot was not so great because I tried building PowerPoints using that tool, and it was okay. It wasn't the best. My hope was like the demo we saw, where like an Excel can turn into a PowerPoint that goes and does a really good job. It just didn't do it. And so my initial experience, and things are changing very quickly, so it might have gotten much better, but it got me to like kind of stop. Yeah, very welcome, Mike. Next question was, is there a check-in code? No, sorry, I don't believe there was a check-in code for this. At least you had not that one Bill gave me, but come into the Discord channel and, it's if there's anything, it's there. Any other questions that need to be answered? Actually, we can end this early if folks don't have any more questions, or I can hang out, and I've left alone some time to be able to do this. Any other questions from folks? So you can raise your hands if you want to see something, you want to ask for something. The whole point is to help you out as much as we can. Bruce, please go ahead. Let me see if you are. Yeah, let me add you to our contributor list. Go for it. You should be a contributor now.
Hi, when is the next time you're going to meet?
So AI Camp runs a bunch of events, quite often with and without me. So I specifically work in San Francisco. I don't know when I'm going to do a specific talk like this one. I think the next one is probably going to be AI agent focused. But if you go to aicamp.ai, you'll see a bunch of similar events run by folks all around the world that do the same thing that I'm doing. And sometimes they're big shots, sometimes they're not so big shots, and sometimes they're pros in product or AI. And so the topics will really guide you, and the speaker names and like the companies they represent might guide you also. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so glad, Raghu. This is why we do it. This is, I think this is why this work is so rewarding. Pratibha, could you please take a hands-on session? I'd be happy to take a hands-on session. If you send me a topic that resonates with a lot of people, I'll pitch it to my team. Pratibha. I have a Phil. Hold on, Phil. Let me see if I gotta add you to the contributor list. A demo work-along session. So I would prefer to have like a demo work-along session, kind of like in person. So in San Francisco, if it makes sense for folks to do it online, I'd be happy to do it online. We just have to make them much smaller so I can focus on like the people involved. So maybe we'd like have sessions with like 10 or 20 people at a time. Well, thanks so much, folks. How to join the contributors list. Boris, reach out to us, or like if you're in the Discord channel, just ask Bill. If not, I'll connect you to him. Like reach out to me. We are always looking for contributors. And I think we had another person who'd raised their hand. If you could just do it one more time, I'd make sure that you're not on the not contributing list. Or just ask your question and no one. Hill R.
Hello. The tools I use allow multiple LLMs to be connected to them. What are your favorite LLMs and for various use cases?
I think it kind of depends. I have very generic answers to this because I think if I want like really high level difficult question to be answered, I might lean towards an O1 or O1 Pro model, which I'm currently splurging on. I really like Cloud's output for writing. In fact, Cloud has been surprisingly good for coding applications. So when I'm on Windsurf, I tend to defer to Cloud, even though O1's available, I think, especially in Cursor. It seems to do a better job with those contexts. As far as multiple agents at the same time, there's a founder in San Francisco, I believe. I want to say it's AirTrain. He made an application that will allow you to push your queries through multiple LLMs at the same time, including like some of the more open source ones, which he's hosting. I want to say it's AI Train. But that's pretty useful for if I'm trying out a new problem and I want to just see like what the different outputs might be for that specific use case. I really like tooling like that as well. There's local use cases, like I've been tinkering with Llama to teach it this custom language called QML in conjunction with C++, which is something that I specialize in. And training it myself has been also really rewarding because I started out with like a 3 billion parameter model, and now I'm tinkering with a 70 billion parameter model. And at first it was just RAG techniques, and now I'm tinkering with, just actually fine tuning. So it's getting costly, but it depends, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure. Yes. I've been looking at using Gemini's Google Gemini Flash 2.0. It has no cost, so that makes it easy to use it to exercise comparisons with other LLMs without having to run much of a bill. Since it's comparing pretty strongly to Claude Sonnet 3.5, I'm considering using it for some future projects.
Yeah, I would agree. I think two of the most surprising use cases for me were but GPT's like sort of voice mode, or ChatGPT's voice mode, where you can actually point it with a camera to things. Like I used it to like install something that I didn't know what parts I needed for. That was really nice and useful. And Gemini has been, especially the 2.0 Flash, has been really, really a fun find, because in some cases it's not so great, but specifically for coding and kind of creating like new apps really quickly for different use cases, it's been fantastic. The interface with the voice I really value.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, Priyanshu is saying Quen's the best. I mean, Quen's great. It has some controversy around it, but I enjoy using it. Let's see, Stan, Devinder, could you share your Discord username? Yeah, I believe it's straight up Devinder Sodhi. But I'm in the AI Camp channel, running like the channel specifically for this. And also, feel free to chat with me on LinkedIn as well. I'll make sure that I put that somewhere. At least I'll throw it in the Discord channel. 1 second. I'm just gonna throw it in the chat right now since we have it. Slash. There you go. Okay, anyone try out DeepSeek V3 yet? I have. Wait, before that, were there any other questions in the, wait, Brian, I know you mentioned one more name. It was, oh, Bill Liu at AI Camp. Boris, that's the answer. Phil R. and Janardhan. Janardhan, did you still have that question? Let me see if you're in the non-contributors list. Janardhan, I'm gonna make you a contributor right now. Feel free to ask your question if you're still available, if you're still around. Pratibha, please go ahead.
Hey Devinder, good evening. I hope you're doing well, and Happy New Year to you. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
So my question is, I actually am a background from a data science, data engineer. So doing a couple of data engineering, data analytics. I'm still learning into this LLM Gen AI. So what do you suggest me? How do I, which course should I pick up to learn this LLM and Gen AI?
Kind of depends on how deep you want to go into it. Do you want to actually tinker with models themselves, or do you just want to use them as an endpoint?
Endpoint. For now, I'm just starting with an endpoint. Yeah.
Then I think my favorite courses recently have been the ones from Deep Learning AI. They're free. I would start from there. They also introduce like how these models actually work under the hood, and they get partnerships with a bunch of different companies where they like demonstrate a little bit deeper than what like your typical YouTube video might, on like how like what's going on under the hood, a little bit of the language around it. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, I strongly recommend just going on your meetup list or your Luma list and just joining a bunch of events. AI Camp actually has been running across the world a bunch of sessions with like end-to-end on LLMs, where we're doing kind of like a month-long thing. And we just finished up an agent-based 5-day class where we're just getting together and doing a study group similar to what this is. Like the point of this talk is kind of to be also just be able to ask questions like this. There's so many resources. I would start with the deep learning AI. I would definitely recommend like local events like AI Camp. And then if you find that you're missing something, Educative is a fantastic resource. There's also, if you're just like really trying to do it high level, because anytime I'm trying to learn something new, I don't want to dive too deep right away. There's this app called Brilliant that I enjoy. It'll actually teach you the basics of like the technology and like get you into it relatively quickly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any open source projects? Yeah, absolutely. There's so many open source projects. Honestly, open up your GitHub and start looking at which ones you want to contribute to. I think it's I'm drawing a blank because there's so many, right? There's if you start out at something like Hugging Face and then you look at some of the repos that are around, I think you'll find plenty of projects to work on.
Yeah, I don't know if I can talk out of turn though.
You can.
I looked at a lot of projects, but there are so many of them. I don't know where to start at.
I totally understand that. I would say this: if you look at it and you think you'll want to work on it in 3 months, start with that one.
Okay.
Because there's so many, it's otherwise like everything is so shiny and it's really hard to just maintain focus and try to get one thing done if you like look at the 100 things that exist, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
Yeah, I totally sympathize with that. I have the same problem even creating this the slides that I mean, look at me. I created slides in like 5 different systems just to see if it could happen. It's so easy to get distracted and like try to tinker with stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Has anyone come across a tool like Devin? Bismuth might be worth your time, Janardhan. Bismuth is, again, a San Francisco-based startup that's creating an agent that hopes to create end-to-end development solutions. And it actually scored really well on like the same test that Devin's running.
What's the name again, Devinder?
Bismuth, Bismuth.
Got it.
Full disclosure, I know the guy who owns the company. Not well, but we've met a few times. Okay, let's see. Bill's last name is Liu. Which is the best AI coding tools for beginner? I'll put out a list. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess this name up, but I'll try my best. Malikarjun. But I'll put up a list and I'll make sure it's on the Discord and my LinkedIn so you have access. Prashant, you're very welcome. All right, I think we're getting to, yeah, Bellal, I will have a recording for this and I'll try to make it available through Bill, and my understanding is that it will be available. Also, feel free to ask any questions you have now. Like, I'm really being intentional about having a really long question and answer section because that happens to be my favorite part about this thing. And also, for me, when I go to an event, sometimes like I have a question and I don't get to ask it, or like sometimes I feel like that's like where I got the most value out of an event. So I'm hoping that you guys get exactly that out of this. And feedback, please. Like if you feel, I really appreciate the kind comments, but if you feel that I could do something better, I'm trying to get better at this, please send me a message.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Do you think programmers will be replaced in a couple of years, or most of them anyway? Because everybody's telling me that and I'm not seeing it.
I don't think programmers are going to get replaced personally. I do think that programmer productivity is going to shoot all the way up, and the people who don't keep up with the tooling that allows them to be that productive are going to find it more difficult to find new jobs. I think there's also going to be a little bit less enthusiasm for new grads trying to get into the field because there's so much value in utilizing your experience plus an LLM. So I think we might have a little bit of a shrink over time. I just don't think the tools, one, the tools aren't quite there yet, and all things point to them being possibly there in the future. But there's no denying the fact that if you utilize these tools correctly, you will become much more productive as a software engineer. You will learn things quicker. And I think it's always been true for software engineering that our field values the people who keep up with the tooling.
Other than the obvious tools like Copilot and all that, is there anywhere I could look at a list of like things like Cursor? And I also heard about it last December, and I haven't started using it yet. Or are these like popping out every day or on a weekly basis?
They're popping up pretty regularly. I would say Cursor is a good one to spend your time on because it has some neat functionality, right? One of the things that the AI tooling in the beginning lacked was that it stops at a certain point, and then it's only trained up to that point, so documentation can get stale. You can actually add document and have this thing like pull documents from the web. So whatever library you're working on, it'll give you fresh input into like what library, what API calls you should be making given that library in that version. It also is good at understanding context. I prefer Windsurf because I can code for longer. I don't hit limits with Windsurf yet. I think that's just like the marketing that they're doing is just unlimited amount of credits for cloud. So I've been using them. It is paid, but there's so many tools. I would say pick the tool at the level that you want to learn and stick with it for a little while until you find something so compelling to move on away from that you have to move away from it. For me right now, that's like Windsurf for the overall picture. I typically flesh out my programs in the beginning, like the overall concept using O1, and then I'll pull the project into Windsurf. And then if there's a strong need for a front end, I might try something quick with Lovable or one of those front end tools. But really, mostly to just demonstrate something to a prospective client, because I do some consulting work, and just to say something like this, get some ideation going. And these tools are going to expand, but I can't know everyone. I didn't cover, for example, Klein. I didn't cover like 6 different tools. V0 today. There's so many tools I didn't cover.
My issue is that my big company policies don't allow us to use these things. Using company laptops, and I have to do that on the side.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work at a really conservative company like Johnson & Johnson to make certain things like that available. The most success I had were with enterprise-grade tooling, and the winner in that space remains Copilot, which is doing a fairly good job at the enterprise-grade level because they are keeping up with the vast majority of the technology. I would start there because Copilot has all of the enterprise-grade security you would need, and it's passing the test for SOC testing, your SOC 2 compliance, your privacy compliance. You own the code, all of those things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Double A. Let me see if I can find you in the chat.
Yeah, hello. My name is Amit, and my question is that a lot of libraries and packages, they keep getting updated. So do these tools like Lovable or Cursor, are they up to date with the newer versions of the packages and libraries?
So that's actually what I alluded to earlier. What you can do with Cursor is you can, I don't know if this tooling is available yet in Windsurf, but you can actually create your own tools in Windsurf. So you could probably implement something like this fairly quickly. If you want an out-of-the-box solution, what Cursor has is the ability to point to any like document website page, and it'll create those embeddings by itself.
Okay, so you mean I can use it to ask question on a new library that I might have locally or elsewhere?
Yeah, let me see if I can just demonstrate that real quick. I think I can. Is my screen still sharing?
Yes, it would be good if you could zoom in a little bit more, please.
Okay, so in my, I know I kind of went overkill, but in my chat box over here, I can just say add docs, right? And it'll say, these are the documents that I've indexed most recently. Like I just indexed Supabase, OpenAI, PyTorch. But let's say I don't have that available. You can actually find like the URL for whatever your document is. You can add it and then give it a name and then have it pull from like that document page. That's one of like the neatest features, I think, in Cursor.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, let's see. Do we have... Could you put the info in the AI Camp Slack channel? Heck yeah, Juan, I'll do that. Difference between Cursor, Codium, CodeGPT, Windsurf, and Tab9. Codium is essentially Windsurf. Cursor, I don't know Tab9 well. CodeGPT I haven't tried yet. But yeah, Cursor and Windsurf, I think I did a simple overview. They're very similar tooling. They have like they constantly one-up each other on what's possible to do with them. The reason I've been leaning towards Windsurf is, and admittedly, I haven't used that much Cursor in the last couple of weeks, so they might have already had like a new update that already takes care of this. It's just that Windsurf I felt was a little bit more stable for me, and it also gave me a little bit more. It let me continue working without like biting into like some kind of a credit limit. All right. Do we have any more questions? I know for some folks this might not be super useful, so feel free to drop off if it's not. But if there's still questions, I'm again happy to answer. I'll stick around until like I get silence for a couple of minutes, and then I'll let it go. Todd, long time no see. Hold on, let me make you a contributor. Done.
So had a question. You saying something that might be Laravel or it might be something else. What are you referring to?
You might have to give me a little bit more context. I don't remember mentioning Laravel.
Okay, so you said something that sounded like it. It might have been. I'll give up.
No, just give me the context around it, and I'll find out.
You said something about front end and tool.
Lovable.
Lovable.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to look at that.
Yeah, it was part of my demo, so it's going to be a link that I provide as part of the. Essentially, I'm going to give you guys my Notion page with all the links to this and any useful YouTube videos.
Ooh, what do you think of Notion?
It's useful. I'm trying it out. I don't want to pay for it because I don't think it gives me that much value, but maybe that's just because I haven't used the tool that much. Well, I'm just still tinkering. Like, I have it because I need to maintain some place to have all of my documentation as a consultant.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tohi, thank you. Again, I'm really sorry if I messed up how to pronounce that name correctly. All right, we're down to something like 70 people. If you have any more questions, folks, please feel free to ask. I think we're coming at the tail end then. Oh, no. Appreciate your time. Absolutely, Megan. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks so much for coming, folks. Again, I'm really thankful that you guys came. Hopefully you'll come to more events like this. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. You have my LinkedIn, you have my Discord channel, and obviously anyone at AI Camp will be happy to help you. Cool. Thanks so much, folks. Have a good one. Bye. See, I have to stop the recording.